friends. Welcome to the Creative Impact Podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Caldwell, and I'm so happy you're here. Each episode, I take some time to chat with fellow artists about life, faith, and the impact of the arts.
She wanted to do a piece to this music by John Adams. And she'd asked me to, hey, I'd like to see kind of do some improvising in the studio. Let's see what we can come up with, as a start for this piece. So, me taking this great opportunity, I was thinking I had barrel turns in it and spins and jumps and all this, and I landed at her feet, and I thought she was going to really be impressed.
Right.
And then she looked at me and she turned off the music and she said, Steve, you have to learn how to dance in stillness.
Hey friends, can you believe we're already over halfway through July? I know we're all facing new challenges every single day, and I hope that wherever you are, this can be a source of encouragement for you. I'd love to connect with you. Find the Creative Impact Podcast on Facebook or Instagram and let me know what you think of the show. Now is a great time to subscribe to the show if you haven't already. Today, you'll get to hear from Steve Rooks. Steve is a former principal dancer with the Martha Graham Dance Company, where he performed for over a decade. His performance credits also include the Alvin Ailey Repertory Ensemble. Steve is currently chair of dance and resident choreographer at Vassar College in New York. Steve shares his incredible journey from discovering dance in college to touring the world as a principal dancer for the Martha Graham Dance Company. He gives us a glimpse into working with Martha, which is so fun to hear, especially for those of you who have studied dance history. We talk about his family and his current role as a teacher, mentor, and choreographer. Steve challenges the assumption that once dancers are done performing, they should automatically become teachers. He encourages dancers to make sure they are teaching from a place of passion and not frustration. I love his advice for dancers in this current season. Be ready. The world is going to be craving the beauty we can bring as we come out of this season of isolation. Steve's humility and wisdom are such a gift. I believe you're going to be greatly encouraged by his words. Enjoy my conversation with Steve Rooks. All right, well, I'm here with Steve Rooks and so excited to get to talk to you today, Steve.
Oh, it's great being here. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for taking the time to chat. And I'm excited to get to kind of hear more about your story and get to share with the listeners as well. So first off, you want to just kind of tell us how are things going for you right now and maybe a little bit of who you are and what you're up to.
Okay, great. Well, been living in New York, we're sort of coming out of the real serious attack of the COVID-19. So the numbers are in my area are really, really going down, which is exciting.
Yeah, that's great.
Thankful my family has been great. We're all doing well. Friends and the community here are doing well as well. So that's been, something, and just kind of everybody's journey during this time is, has its own challenges, but it's nice to kind of be coming on this end of it. And whatnot.
For sure.
Yeah. So, and also adjusting to the whole, interactive world of Zoom and whatnot, a lot of meetings. And I think we're all adjusting to that too. And
yeah, a little
classes,
zoomed out right now.
Yeah. But teaching classes, but also understanding that, I'm grateful for that potential for connection during a difficult time like this, but also realizing that probably in the future landscape of dance, social media is going to become more and more an integral part of what we do as artists.
Yeah, it definitely seems like it.
But I don't know if you wanted me to talk a little bit about my beginnings in dance, or if that's a good time to
Yeah,
start.
that would be great. So if you want to share with us, what got you started in dance in the first place, or in the arts in general?
Yeah. Well, I was, it's interesting because, I didn't have the story of, growing up with visions of dance at all.
Oh, really? Okay.
I did karate. I went to school and all of that, and dance wasn't even on the radar, and especially concert dance. But what happened was I went to college. I went to Dartmouth College, and I was actually studying music.
Oh,
and
that's great.
and at the time, the Dance Theater of Harlem was coming to campus, and I had never heard of them before. But some friends of mine were saying, "Oh my gosh, this is an amazing, company was started by Arthur Mitchell in response to the assassination of Martin Luther King. These dances are amazing," and I had no interest at all. To be honest, I mean, it's dance. Who wants to see ballet? And somehow I got a ticket. It sold out immediately, but I got a ticket. And I went with some friends, and I sat there, kind of slumped in my seat, just kind of waiting for it to start. Although I knew there was a lot of energy in the audience. And Rachel, as soon as the curtain went up, I was transformed in the beginning of my seat. the front of my seat, and I just watched spellbound the entire
Wow.
time. And afterwards, it was like an epiphany. I said, I have to do this. And it wasn't that I had to become a ballet dancer, but I knew that I had to have this experience of movement. And I think what happened was that that performance had knocked down so many stereotypes I had about dance. I mean, for one thing, that nothing I could relate with, it's very kind of Eurocentric, but here's almost a totally all Black company. So there was that
Right.
connection, ethnically. And then, that the men were kind of soft, but these men were powerful. And, how dancers have to really, have a lot of strength. So seeing all
Yeah.
of that power on stage and the ability to relate with them, at least as people, it just awoke, something in me. And then afterwards, I continued and finished my degree in music, but I also started getting involved with like productions that needed movers and whatnot. And I take master classes from time to time. And then when I left, I moved back home to Washington, D.C., and I was teaching special education during the day and
Oh,
then
yeah.
taking dance classes at night.
That's
And then
so
during
cool.
it almost drove me crazy to just the
Oh, I
scheduling,
bet.
but I
Yeah.
was so, I wanted to continue with this, just kind of seeing what this dance thing was about, although I had to work. So anyway, what happened was in the process, I just started falling in love with the dance classes. That became the most important part of my day. And there was a dancer choreographer named Greg Reynolds, who used to be in the Paul Taylor's company, who was down in Washington, and he happened to see me. Happened to see me in class. He said, "Look, I think you have some talent, actually." He said, "But you really need to work on it." And he said, I'm restarting my company back in New York. And why don't you come apprentice with me and then take some classes? And if it doesn't work out, you can always come back to DC,
Right.
work and then, work on your master's in music or something. But if you don't try dance now, you'll never know if it can happen.
So
So
true. Yeah.
it sounded like a good deal to me. So anyway, to make a long story short, I auditioned for a scholarship at Alvin Ailey. I just said, why don't we just try Ailey, and I had seen a couple.
Right. I know all of us that are dancers are like, whoa, Alvin Ailey.
But and I guess because I was so naive, I didn't realize it was probably going to be a really difficult thing to do. But
Right.
I went to the audition. It was sizzling hot in the studio. There was all these guys, and at the end of the audition, I didn't really know what had happened because there was so many guys. But anyway, they called my number, and I got a full scholarship.
That's
So I
amazing.
went from taking 5 classes a day to 18 classes, 5 classes a week to 18 classes a week.
Oh,
I
wow.
would say
Yeah.
the first month I lost 20 pounds.
Oh, my
Just
goodness.
just from that. But it was my start and foray into dance, and kind of the rest is history. I stayed at the Alien organization about 4 years and ended up being in the second company. And then while I was in the second company, I was on scholarship at the Graham School because I just fell in love with that technique. And then through circumstances, I got invited to join the Martha Graham Company, and I stayed with them for over a decade.
That
So
is so incredible.
that's kind of the snapshot of it all. Just so a real shout out to all the late bloomers out there because it does happen. And I
Right.
mean, although my situation is a little bit Cinderella, but it is it is possible to start at a later age.
That's for sure. And that's so cool to think of how just the beginnings, there was just that desire or that love planted in you. And then,
Yeah,
just the willingness to pursue it and say,
yeah.
hey, this door opened. Might as well follow it and see where it leads. And
Right. And with the other thing too, Rachel, is that one of the advantages of starting so late, there's a certain desperation that happens because I couldn't
yes,
like take a week off. It's like every moment, every class was vital because I was so far behind in terms of experience. And so I was just desperate. I mean, and at first it was a little unhealthy. It was just almost obsessive, but then it became more balanced. But I realized that I just had to work extra hard,
right.
and I
Yeah.
was all right with that. Yeah.
I could see how there would be a different level of just soaking everything in, every
Right.
single thing that the teacher says. Whereas if you've
Exactly.
been in it years and years, you kind of, I don't know, you
Yeah.
lose a little bit of that energy, I think.
Yeah. Well, certainly by the time some dancers got to my age, they were already starting to burn out. Where for me, it was like, hey, this is exciting and great. Let's keep
Right.
going. So
Exactly. So I'm curious to know what got you into music since you went to college for music.
yeah, and I was a late bloomer there too. I mean, I couldn't even read music until I was 16.
Oh, wow. Cool.
I was in some music appreciation course in high school, and this teacher, James Smith, he was just an incredible teacher. And I said, I'd like to take piano lessons. And so I started studying piano with him. I became his assistant. He was a school organist. And so I would help him, on Sunday services, as page turner, and just keeping things organized for him. And I just started studying piano. They had a music theory course. I took that, and I just really started falling in love with music. But the problem was, I like music a lot, Rachel. But if I'm honest, I didn't have a real great talent for it. It was something that I enjoyed doing.
Right.
And so even when I got to college, I mean, I was good at it. I mean, I actually was selected to be a senior fellow, which is where a senior at the college could, instead of finishing the traditional major, would undertake a research project for their senior year. And mine
Oh, nice.
was writing a piano concerto. So I spent my whole senior year writing a piano concerto.
Wow.
But at the end product, though, even wasn't that spellbinding. And I think the music community should be very thankful that I did become a musician, because I would have been pretty mediocre, So I'm glad I
Gotcha.
discovered dance.
Yeah, for sure. But what I love is, and we'll probably get into this more later, but just the connection with music. I think I can see that in you as a dancer and as a teacher and even a choreographer.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
thinking through coming into the Graham Company, and you said you were there for 10 years.
Yeah. Officially for 10 years. I went back and guessed it a few times. They had a Twilight Art project that I came back and understudy for that. And then there was a performance of Appalachian Spring that was done on the anniversary down in Washington, D.C. So I came back and reprised one of my roles there. And then the last thing was at the Joyce Theater in New York in I think 2007 or 2008, where it was something called From the Horse's Mouth, which is a tribute to Graham. And that was my swan song. That was it after that.
That's so neat.
Yeah,
so was Martha alive when you were in the company?
Yeah, she was. Wow. And in fact, when I left, she died a few weeks later. It was
wow.
and it was kind of interesting, because I knew that I wanted to be in a company. I didn't know how much I would want to be in the company once she passed away. And we knew that it was going to come at some point. And so timing wise for me, it was great. I had just gotten married and I really wanted to focus on my marriage, and everything. So the timing for me was good. But shortly after that, she passed away, that April 1st of the year that I left.
Kind of like end of an era in two ways.
Yeah. But I so appreciated learning and sitting under her and watching her work. And I know that it had a great impact on who I am today. And just even some conversations with her, just really still to this day, I remember, and it had great impact on me.
Yeah, that's super amazing. And so I'm curious, after that, so you said you got married, and then was that when you transitioned more into a teaching role after that?
Yeah, I mean, I got married, and then, but the first 2 years of my marriage, I was still performing, but my wife would come on tour. Desiree would come on tour.
Cool.
So, so she came over to Greece with us, and Japan and Boston. I mean, so it was really that was kind of nice. But I knew that I wanted to be more settled, to really work on us. And so I retired from the company and thought I was leaving dance altogether, but then started getting calls to teach. And I just fell in love with it. I love teaching. I love mentoring. I love the idea of being able to give young people information, as best as I can. And so it was a really great time to transition, getting, being married, but also, leaving performing and now trying to give to others. So it was really important.
Right. That makes sense for sure. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious that how did you and your wife meet? If you don't mind sharing.
No, not at all. Not at all. Actually, we were both members of the same church, and we would kind of see each other from afar. But there was no bells and whistles. It was just she was an usher there at the church. She worked with the youth ministry, and we see each other in passing, but there wasn't any connection per se. But then there was a singles event called Mobilize to Serve, a convention, and I was at a booth. And she came by to chat, as she, just because we went to the same church. And then there was one of the other workers there said, "Oh my gosh, she's really a good looking lady," And I said, "Yeah, she goes to church." It's kind of, yeah. And so she said, "Why don't you you all go out to dinner or something? I'll watch the booth and whatnot." So we went out to dinner. We just had a great time socially and whatnot. But then after that, I find myself going on tour, just calling just to check up on her. And then I got back, and we would kind of hang out. And then it went from transition to just kind of being social friends to we realized we were starting to fall for each other.
Right.
But it was, yeah. And then we ended up getting married.
That's so cool.
But initially it wasn't sort of the bells and whistles. It's just we were in the same church.
Right. Same circles and
but then the connection happened.
That's so special. And now I know y'all have children. So how many kids do you guys have?
Two adult children. Yeah. My oldest daughter is 27 7, and she graduated from Hillsong College in November. She was there for years at Hillsong in Sydney, Australia. Now she's in
Wow.
San Francisco working with Expedia. And then my youngest daughter graduated from college last year. She got her degree in 3 years. And
Wow, that's impressive.
so she's actually working at the university, at Pace University in their Carlson. She's a supervisor and doing really well as well. So they've grown up and we're empty nesters now.
Yeah,
but
and a new season as well.
yeah, so it's great.
That's really special. And now you currently are at Vassar College, is that right?
Yeah, I've been at Vassar for a couple of decades now, and right now I'm the resident choreographer and a professor there, and enjoy it very much. The school has been incredibly supportive to my work, and I've had some great opportunities because of being there. And so, I mean, God really, it was really a provision from God to be there right now. And so, yeah, I've been enjoying I've been there for a few decades and enjoy the interaction with the students.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you kind of just mentioned this, but how does your faith impact, or has your faith impacted your journey as an artist?
For me, it's understanding that, and I don't say that I live this way all the time, Rachel, but trying to understand and remember that there really isn't a divide between secular and sacred. It really is all about the kingdom. Even when I was in the Graham Company, I would always pray before my performances. And it's not because the subject matter of the dance that I was going to do per se would be liturgical or biblical based,
Right.
but in some way that God would be revealed in the beauty of movement. And there's a scripture that I held on, that I still hold on to today. It's one of my favorite scriptures. It's Colossians 3:23-24. And I'm paraphrasing, but it's whatever you do, do it as unto the Lord and not for men, because it's Christ Jesus whom you're serving. And this whole notion that whatever you do has to be, as it were, an offering unto the Lord, really.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that also with performances too. And I'm a real advocate that the Lord does not only speak through words. I think a lot of
Yeah.
times we think that the music has to have a declaration of scripture, or it has to be a spiritual or a gospel tune or whatnot. But I believe that God is revealed in nature. I believe that, that his character is revealed in nature, and that the beauty, really unadulterated beauty reflects, some of the characteristics of the Lord. So
Yeah.
my hope was, and it still is, that in what I do, even if I'm not able to declare the gospel message, that somehow the fragrance of Christ is left in what I do. And sometimes, and to be honest, sometimes I probably miss it. But the goal, my heart's desire, is that would be the case.
Right. That's coming across to people. And I think that's true, like that sense of the Spirit of God, being in something. I've watched performances from all sorts of different companies,
Right.
and, it may be a secular company, quote unquote, and, but it still can impact you so profoundly. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that you do is that we forget this sometimes, but it's truth, is that, one of the first declarations that the Lord made about humanity is that, we were made in the image of God. And so that imago Dei, that us being image bearers, is inherent, whether you know the Lord or not,
Right.
but we're made in this image. And so even people don't realize sometimes they're declaring his glory, even if they don't know him. Just
Yeah.
because we're made in the image of God. It doesn't mean that every act they do is godly or everything, it works from truth, but the design, the ultimate design of every human being is that we would be image bearers. And that the bottom line is, when you relate to somebody, even if fundamentally they're on a total another end of the spectrum in terms of belief, the common denominator is that we were all made in the image of God.
Mm-hmm.
And that image is being declared.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So just to kind of, I guess, wrap up the performance aspect, what would you say was one of the biggest highlights from your performance career?
There was, I mean, a lot of my performances in the Graham Company were amazing. Opportunities to perform on all the big stages, Paris Opera, the Met, Lincoln Center, and all like that. It was really great. And I think I did something like 23 European tours. So it was a lot. That was all great. But one of my most memorable performances was actually dancing in Jerusalem with, and it was I was guesting with a company called Morning Star Classical Biblical Theater. And we did this performance called Throughout Eternity, this full evening work. And at the end, the audience was just applauding. And then we just went out and just started dancing in the audience and dancing among the people.
Oh, neat.
And I know to this day that was the most inspired performance I ever did.
Wow. Yeah, you can just kind of feel it.
Yeah, but also God just took over. And I don't mean in some sort of, mystical way, but it was a real yielding and just the full expression of everything that I had learned to that point. So I'll always remember that, just dancing out and the people just celebrating, and again, you're in a community where wasn't the full revelation of who Jesus is, because it was in a Jewish audience, but he was being declared in what we did, and it was incredible. The audience was amazing, and just being in Jerusalem,
Yes.
it was quite remarkable.
I had a chance to travel there last summer, and it was incredible.
Amazing place, really, really amazing place. So that would probably one of my highlights.
Yeah. And if you feel comfortable, would you be willing to share maybe a low point from the journey as a performer as well?
Sure. When I was I just become a principal dancer in the company, and I was having a really strong season, and we were getting ready to do a tour of Canada, and I was actually on the poster for that tour.
Oh, yeah.
So it was a real kind of pivotal moment. But right before the tour, a few months before the tour, I found out that my father was diagnosed with lung cancer.
Yeah.
So it was, we were dealing with his treatments and whatnot, and everything. But the marvelous thing about it, in the process of that, he got saved.
Wow.
but radically saved. So it was really authentic. It was bona fide. He just fell in love with the Lord. So although it was very difficult in dealing with the medical condition, his spiritual condition was amazing.
Yeah.
But we were moving forward in preparations for this tour, and it was sort of hit or miss, just where he was going to be and all of that. And I flew down to visit with him in Washington. And he, it was kind of like everybody's kind of wait and see. It could be months, it could be, no one knew. And so he said, look, you have my blessings, just go on and do the tour. And so I got on the plane, and I went back to New York. But by the time I landed, he had taken a turn from the worst. And so I had to go back to DC, and he ended up passing away.
Yeah.
It wasn't so much the missing of the tour. I missed that whole part of the tour and whatnot, obviously. But it was just that season, where in one way it was a really high point in what I was doing, but then dealing with, his serious illness and then him leaving us. It was hard. It was hard, but again, the really beautiful thing was the security in knowing where he is right now, which kind of helped us all kind of navigate through that. But that was a tough time.
Definitely. Yeah. Thank you for being willing to share that. And
no problem.
Yeah. It's interesting to see sometimes it can coincide, some of the highlights and the low points of our lives, can be happening at the same time.
Yeah, exactly.
God's faithfulness going through it with us,
Exactly.
So,
yeah.
Well, I'd love to kind of dig a little bit deeper into what we were talking about earlier with choreography. And I know that's one of the things that you have a chance to do a lot right now at Vassar and just in different travels. And I know your choreography has been a huge influence on my life, and getting to take classes and learn pieces from you at intensives and at Audeum in that community. And one of my favorite all-time pieces, and I haven't seen all your works and I would love to, but one of my favorites is Bitter Earth.
Oh, yeah.
So beautiful. I could just watch that on repeat over and over.
It was, kudos to Audeum and the marvelous dances they had. It just made the whole process really easy. And, Rachel, what's interesting is because I look at works now, and some you really, really like, and some, like, kind of missed out. Bitter Earth seemed to have worked, but I have to admit, it was just that it was that season and the dancers and the music.
Yes,
which is just it's incredible music. So I think that convergence just made the whole process a lot easier. And I have to admit, I'm very musical driven in terms of choreography. If the music really grabs me, I tend to be even more invested in the process.
For sure.
And that particular piece, was just one I really felt invested in.
Definitely. Yeah, it's so beautiful. I'll post a link to it in the show notes so people can watch. But that's one that I go back to and I show my students, and love to kind of be inspired by in my own work. And so obviously music and that connection with music in your life comes out through your choreography. Is there anything else that inspires you as a choreographer when you come to create a piece?
Yeah. I have to admit that a lot of times it's music, and that's not necessarily a great thing. I think sometimes, you can be kind of so married to the music that you can kind of limit, the other possibilities in creation. But I think because music is such a big part of my life, it does tend to steer when I create. But a lot of times what it's kind of been my niche is that I'll get asked to do pieces in a really, really short amount of time.
Yeah, which is a challenge in and of itself.
It's a challenge, but I'm you start to develop the skill at it. It's not that the ultimate product is always going to be earth-shattering or noteworthy, but just learning that process, trying to go in and assess the situation or being given a task and then, trying to make it happen as fast as possible. So it's kind of helped me in that process of the skill of trying to put together things at a good rate. Also coming in a situation, really trying to have a connection with the dancers as quickly as possible to see what they're able to bring to the table too. Because I also am really impacted by dancers and what they bring, so it's a little more collaborative, I think. And as I get older, it becomes even more and more collaborative.
Right.
I don't want, I can't be the source of all movement anymore, so I really want to be able to see what they bring, and then we can kind of meet at this middle place and hopefully get something that's worthy.
Right. That makes sense. About how often are you choreographing new works?
It's interesting. Some years it's like 5 pieces,
Yeah.
I mean, and sometimes more than that. And then sometimes it's like this year, like up to this date, I've done 2.
Okay.
I had a duet that's going to be performed. Actually, it's going to be performed in New York this fall at a festival with two artists are going to be performing. And then I did a piece at Vassar, a group piece. Those are the 2 that I've done so far. And I've been asked to do at least one more in the fall, a larger piece. But the interesting thing, the one that I'm going to do this fall, I'm scheduled to do, I have to do it online. So I'm going to have to I'm going to be working with the dancers. They're going to be in another state. And I'm going to be choreographing online for them. So I've never done that before. And I just pray for me,
Yes, for sure.
So
sounds exciting and very daunting at the same time.
Exactly. We'll see what happens.
For sure. That's really exciting. And it will be interesting to see how technology shifts the way we do things as well.
Yeah. And it'll stretch me too, which I'm looking forward to.
Definitely. So do you see, I'm sure working in the Graham Company for a decade, you got to watch Martha Graham, in her process as well. Do you feel like that influences how you work?
Absolutely. There's a couple things. Well, I mean, I may say more than 2, but there's definitely some things that I learned. One thing I loved about Martha's work, and not everybody has to like, but it's very specific. Like even where dancers are placed on stage is specific because it's a theater. I mean, the stage was a theater for her, and so I love the fact that when she did a piece, that everything it couldn't just be arbitrary. It had to have a relationship, and I loved how her mind worked. I remember one time she was working on a section from this piece called Andromache's Lament. And it was a simple section where Andromache had to walk through this chorus of women that were doing these series of backfalls. And, she had choreographed it, and the first version I thought was pretty good, but it wasn't good for her. It wasn't settled, and she was really wrestling with it. And so I remember we were all sitting there, and we were watching the process of her, because she had this kind of, you could see that, she was in her 90s then. She could see that there was this image or this image is going through her mind that she was trying to get to the dancers. And so she said, try this. And so she was kind of looking at this video in her mind as she's doing this. And anyway, to make a long story, she kept working, and then she got her final product. And then what she ultimately came to just made even more sense. And I remember looking at George White, another dancer, we were just like, oh my gosh. That's why she's who she is.
Right.
The getting in there and working out the details and minutia, so because it had to be right. So I just try, whenever I have a chance to do, I try to think about that a lot. And then also another real thing that I'm still learning, even though it's been like decades, is we were working on she was working on a piece. She wanted to do a piece to this music by John Adams. And she'd asked me to, hey, I'd like to see kind of do some improvising in the studio. Let's see what we can come up with, as a start for this piece. So, me taking this great opportunity, I was thinking this, I had barrel turns in it and spins and jumps and all like this. And I landed at her feet and I thought she was going to really be impressed.
Right.
And then she looked at me and she turned off the music and she said, Steve, you have to learn how to dance in stillness. And she just let that statement sit.
Like mic drop.
yeah, it was a mic drop moment, but it was so potent and real. It was that my thinking was that the amount and the dexterity of the steps makes the piece valid. And she was saying it's just so much more. Sometimes the validity is just in the stillness, in the midst of that chaos. And so it's never left me. And I'm trying to always hold on to that. And I'm not always successful in my pieces, but I try to think about the punctuation marks and the Selah moments.
Yes.
So that you're not just constantly digesting movement.
That's super profound. Yeah. I think I've seen that in, when you watch pieces or even as a dancer, it almost shows a maturity in a dancer when they can just like command the presence and the space with total stillness, or taking those dynamic shifts too.
Exactly.
So it's funny looking back at old things that I did too, and I'm like, whoa, I'm just constant movement all the time.
We're also living in a culture where they embrace that too. I mean,
yes.
It's a very and that's okay. That's just where we're at in terms of style now. But some of the most powerful moments sometimes are just when there's not anything going on and you're made to kind of have this tension rise and then the movement happens. I was just looking a few days ago, I was looking at this piece by Martha Nichols and it's How We Left, I think is the name of it.
Mm-hmm.
And the first part of the piece, they're just standing on stage in this amazing lighting and this powerful music. And it's so satisfying. I mean, then they move, and the movement is extraordinary. But she allows this stuff to build up in anticipation, and then the release happens rather than just giving it all the way to digest right away. Just something that's really provocative.
For sure. Are you looking to build a new website or improve your current website? I personally use Bluehost web hosting for my website, and I have to tell you, I love the user-friendly nature of their site and the seamless integration that they have with WordPress. The launch of the Creative Impact website has been so much smoother because of Bluehost. To learn more about what Bluehost has to offer, you can check out creativeimpactpodcast.com/Bluehost. You can find additional resources to live creatively and make an impact at creativeimpactpodcast.com/resources. Now back to my conversation with Steve. How do you feel like the landscape of dance has changed or shifted over these past few decades that you've been, really invested in it?
Yeah. Well, it's even shifting now with COVID-19, but
oh yeah, for sure.
So shifted again, but I think obviously dancers are much more capable and talented now. I mean, the talent pool is just thick and extraordinary. You guys just do so much more than we did, as dancers, which is supposed to happen.
Right, so over time.
Yeah, and also it used to be that, you would go and sit under a choreographer. But, and you work with that choreographer and learn from them, and then you go off and do something perhaps. Where now is, young dancers at a very early part in their career want to choreograph, and they have access to a lot more information that we did too, because whereas you'd have to go and see a company perform in a theater to get influenced by it, now you can just go on YouTube and see 5 companies in 5 minutes.
That's so true.
And see how so you're getting all of this you're exposed to all of this information, now that you could probably pull into your bag of tricks in terms of creating works. So there's that, but also that it's a lot harder to dance now than I think it was years ago too, in the sense that there's more dancers and there's less full-time opportunities. So there's dancers usually have to have other skills to sustain their dancing. Freelancing is probably more the norm than just joining a company and staying for 10 years.
Right.
And so, but again, there's a lot of great things being birthed out of that process though too, which I celebrate. And now we have this new challenge where there's going to be this transition to things online. The online part is not going to leave. It may go to the background a little bit once we're through the the crisis that we're in right now, but it's not going to go away. And that's
Mm-hmm.
going to get even further developed. So it's going to be exciting to see what you guys do with that.
Yeah, for real. Yeah, I'm curious to see
Yeah.
how it's going to play out in the next
Sure.
couple of years and then even
Yeah.
into, the next decade or so. So
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah. So it sounds like something you're super passionate about right now is that mentorship,
Well,
teaching,
yeah.
raising up the next generation. So yeah, you want to speak a little bit into that and your heart for mentorship?
Yeah. And I'm not trying to sound, I don't want to sound melodramatic or, over dramatic. It is an honor to teach, and I'm awed that God would allow me the trust me enough to work with young people to speak, and not because I know everything or that I've got all this great wisdom, but it's an honor to be able to mentor. I don't know how to express it any better than that. Teaching, I think, is a gift, and I got blessed with two careers. I had a performing career that I just thoroughly enjoyed and went all over the world, et cetera, et cetera. But then I get this whole new career where I get to teach, and it's as satisfying, and sometimes even more, to be able to just impart and speak. And again, not to try to draw this allegiance to me, but just to give young people information that hopefully will help them on their journey and things that I've learned on the way. That
Mm-hmm.
they won't take all of it, but they may take some of it. And so it's really important. And I remember years ago, I saw this, and I'm going to really paraphrase, so I may not get the whole story right. Miles Monroe, it was a video I saw, and in it, he said he had a dream, or someone was talking, and there was this image of this like man of God or elder that was in a
Mm-hmm.
casket lying down, and he had a baton in his hand, like a racing baton.
Yeah.
And the essence of it, he said, that's so tragic. He said, because no leader should die without having passed the baton.
Ooh, yeah.
And I just thought that just makes so much sense. It would behoove any of us as elders to not feel the responsibility and urgency of imparting and blessing and encouraging and mentoring the people coming behind us. I want to release. I want to bless. Go for it. Yeah, do better than I did. Yes, do it.
Right.
And we should be excited about that. So that's really close to my heart, because if not, it's not worth doing.
Right.
I don't teach because, I'm glad I didn't have to teach because, I can't dance anymore. It wasn't that I didn't start teaching because, I was too old to dance. I got to select and celebrate and enjoy teaching because I wanted to do it.
Yeah, that makes a lot
And
of
that's
sense.
it's a very healthy place to be at.
Speaking of that transition moment, if you think back to the time when you were stepping more into that teaching role, do you have any
Right.
advice for people that are kind of at that crossroad right now in their own lives as a performer, and then they're kind of stepping out of that performing role and going more into that teaching mentorship role?
Well, I think this is just an idea. I think that a lot of times dancers think that once they stop performing, by default, they have to teach. And I would urge caution with that, because
Mm-hmm.
I don't think teaching really works unless you really want to do it. And you
Mm.
feel, because if not, it becomes, you're teaching out of frustration, rather than teaching out of passion.
Ooh, that's
And
good. Yeah.
it's just too hard. Teaching is hard. It's really, really hard. It takes a lot out of you, and
Mm-hmm.
people don't realize that a lot of times because we're so focused on the performing aspect. But if you're not really at a place where you feel passionate about it, I would suggest seeing if there's other things that you might be able to do, support the arts, or get into something else that's not related to dance at all. But if you really want to teach, if you're making that transition, see how passionate you are about it. How invested do you want to be? Because it's going to be hard. It's going to be challenging, and it's going to be different in a lot of ways, but different in a wonderful way. And you want to be able to celebrate that rather than feel like it's an inevitability.
That's
Something to
beautiful.
think about.
Yeah, definitely. Being a professor at Vassar College, what
Mm.
is your kind of day-to-day life look like with that?
Yeah. Well, I go in and I have to teach my classes, and we're a residential college, so there's a lot of interaction with the students, which I love. I teach I teach a spectrum of classes too. I teach some absolute beginners, and then I have the dancers who are more seasoned, like pre-professional, that
Mm-hmm.
are in the company. And so there's this whole, and I love every level. I love I love working with people who, getting people, at the beginning level, just excited about dance and moving. And then
Right.
at the beginning, they can't do first position. But at the end of the semester, they're doing that and they're turning and they're moving. And so that's very exciting and satisfying for me. And so I enjoy that engagement a lot. And then we have it's a non-major program, but the dancers are really bright and talented. And so setting choreography on this is really exciting on the seasoned dancers. And so that's it's very gratifying. They're going to have great faculty too. So I usually go in the morning, I teach my classes and then maybe rehearsals in the afternoon. I'll do that. Sometimes if we're in a crunch, we might do some additional rehearsals on the weekend. And then we have the series of performances. We have, 2 fall series performances. We have in the winter, there's a major gala, and then we have a modern arts festival and then spring festivals. And then, there's independent projects. So it's like in any dance department, those kind of responsibilities.
Yeah, exactly.
But
that's really cool. So with teaching and everything, are you pretty much solely focused on Graham technique there, or do you do multiple things?
Well, all of my technique classes are Graham based, and it just because I want people to get it. To have that connection. And we always look at a video of one of Martha's works because I think I have a responsibility to do that.
Right. To pass it on,
Right. But I also teach choreography and I choreograph too. And that's not necessarily Graham informed.
Right.
That's just, and especially choreography. I don't just rely on Graham. I mean, there's a whole lot of, ways that I try to move. But my technique classes though are Graham based. Mm-hmm. And that's so that, again, because I feel that I need to have that responsibility of making that connection there for them. Some of them never heard of Martha Graham. So
right. That's true. Wow. I know. It's like, as a dancer, most of us growing up, especially I think when you go through college program, you hear a lot about the history and everything.
Right.
So it's hard to imagine people not knowing who Martha Graham is, but it's true.
It's true. Yeah.
And one thing that I've loved taking your classes is seeing, and just Graham technique or probably some of the more formative techniques in modern dance is there's sort of a set process, almost like a ballet class, be of sort of a set progression. And then I think one of the things that I run into as a teacher is feeling like I always have to change it up and do something new and, try all these new things, but it's kind of refreshing to see, you could do the same exercises over and over again and it's still, you're learning more depth and knowledge of it. So
exactly. It's interesting. There's a lot of pressure on modern and contemporary choreographers to always have something fresh. Whereas like if you go to a ballet class, there's certain exercises you repeat all the time. The tendus, the fondus, the frappes and the rond de jambe en l'air and all of that. Those are certain staples at the bar and nobody's offended if you have to do it the same way everywhere. It's just like, it's this kind of expectation. But for modern, and contemporary, it's always this idea, let's do something new or when are we going to dance? This is kind of like expectation of freedom. So you have to fight that sometime. And one of the things that I think is great about codified techniques like Horton and Graham and Lamone, Dunham, is that you get an opportunity to explore movement, but you're also really working on the instrument, the technique.
Right,
and that's and I know that for me, again, this isn't for every dance, but for me, it was really important to be connected with a form of the art that made you train your body. Again, because also I was also the place too, because I also was a late bloomer. The training part had to be in place. It couldn't be just feeling the moment. I had or warming up to dance. It'd have to be training. So that's kind of informed what I do right now too. I really think that training is important, and having a codified technique I think works really well.
Yes, I can feel that. And so, thank you for that. It's been really helpful for me to see that and the benefit and the value that it gives to students as well as a teacher. So, totally kind of somewhat shifting gears here. I would be curious just to hear, your heart, your thoughts on kind of our current events right now. Talked somewhat about COVID-19 and how that's been affecting us. And then also there's been a lot going on with, racial tensions coming to the forefront and injustices that have been happening. And just would love to hear your heart and how you've been processing with all that.
It's interesting, Rachel, because there's so many layers to it. And I think that for all of us, there's not a standard response. Like, I've been through this, therefore I'm responding like this. I mean, there's a couple, this is just speaking personally. I've had to just navigate through a lot of emotions. I mean, I think first, coming into the coronavirus and just seeing this kind of flat line of the world, where
Yeah.
everything stopped. The economy stopped. People stopped. It's
Yeah, like
serious.
Broadway was shut down. We're
Yeah,
like, when
everything
has this
shut.
ever
And,
happened?
all of the monetary systems, just everything getting flatlined. And so that I knew that we were in the beginning of a kind of a great reset. And something that was really on my heart then and still is now is that coming out of this reset, it can't be a blip on the radar like 9/11 was, where it just happens and you go back to normal. I think that coming out of this, we really have to think about how God wants us transformed. And so there's that notion that I don't want to come out of this just kind of like, whew, glad that's over with, let's go back to normal. But just there's a lot that I think the Lord is trying to say right now. So there's that part of it. And then right in the midst of this, of course, then the revelation of just the deep-seated problems coming to the forefront of just systemic racism and injustice and all like that. And we're dealing with a culture now that, especially young people, and this is kudos to generations, but is they're really passionate about justice. It's not, it's like that's the core, and we can't dismiss that. I think that's really significant. And so I've been trying to pay attention to that a lot. Is that, it's not like, well, this is just status quo, we'll get over it or just forgive. They say, no, we need to deal with this. We need to have conversations. There needs to be there needs to be things put in motion that address things that are systemic. But having said that, because it's systemic, it's going to take time. And I know there's a lot of, people who want to come forward with statements and which are wonderful as starters, like, they'll make a statement against racism or policy changes, and those things need to happen. But what I'm really hoping is that they're the one-on-one purposeful conversations that are going to be messy and awkward.
Right.
But if you can get through the mess and the awkwardness and be willing to have grace on both ends of it, I think we can come out of it healed. And I know ultimately the healing comes with when it's God directed, the Lord directed. But in the meantime, just having honest conversation. And again, the other person may just not understand, but just be willing to say, okay, yeah, let's try to talk so that we can understand, But I think just unadulterated rage and anger and frustration, if we allow that to take over, then we'll miss the opportunity, And a lot of people are really angry and are full of rage, and they've lived with injustice so long. So I'm not discrediting that, but my heart's passion is that we can put the political rhetoric aside, which is kind of just overwhelming, and just realize that we have to kind of be our own CEOs and make decisions that honor people and honor God and honor people. So that's kind of So that's kind of where I'm at right now. I really want to be at that place. My relationships with people. I have a lot of really close friends. That aren't of my race. But my relationship with them is a priority. So I want to make sure that even if there are certain passions that I have or beliefs that I have, that I also understand that I'm not willing to compromise our friendship. We're going to get through this together. We'll work it out. But I value you so much. We're not going to lose that in the process by God's grace, And so
that's a beautiful heart behind it,
So that's kind of where I'm at right now. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the relationships are so key, and just building the relationships and continuing to have conversations, even like you said, if it's messy or awkward or that kind of thing. But to know that we're there, we're for each other, and
I think also it's understanding too that it's also God's heart. I think that the Lord is allowing us to come forward because it needs to be dealt with. It's not something let's just get away so we can go back to the kingdom. No, this is part of what God does in His kingdom work.
Yes.
And He's passionate about that. This is important to Him, and so I think we have to keep that perspective as well.
For sure, and specifically for artists, because most of our listeners are probably artists as well, whether dancers or musicians, visual artists, that kind of thing. Do you have any specific word for the artists right now in this season?
Art has such healing possibilities, Rachel. And it's the one thing that's always consistent. And when you've gone through plagues and wars and all of that, the arts still thrive, just as an entity, and people still yearn for it. People were going to movies during the world wars, and stuff like, because they're looking for something beautiful, and I find myself sometimes looking at some dancers on Instagram, and they're just expressing this, and it's kind of refreshing to kind of look at something that's not connected with a political ideology. Although dance can do that, it can be, but just seeing just what it kind of recharge and touch the things that initially got us involved with it anyway. And people, I think, are coming out of all of this in some way. They're going to be yearning for something beautiful in transient. Yes, there's going to be. I guarantee there's going to be millions of COVID-19 ballets and social justice pieces that have come out. So there's going to be that too. There's going to be a lot of those, but there's going to be sometimes people are just going to want to see two artists just expressing the beauty of this art form. Mm-hmm. So I think artists should be prepared for that, and understand too that as we're communicating now, this social media is going to be a part of that as well. Mm-hmm. But it can be an extension, not a detriment to what we really want to say.
Yeah, for sure. I really appreciate that. I know it's going to definitely speak to the hearts of artists right now, and how we can be intentional about going into this new season and going into, like you said, not just to get back to our old what it was at some point, but moving forward and finding new healing and new depth of understanding and everything.
Absolutely, Rachel.
For sure. Yeah. Well, I super appreciate it. This last question is more just for fun. One that I like to ask all of our guests is, what is one of your favorite things right now?
Oh, gosh, I would say sitting outside. And I know that sounds so, but just being in fresh air. Yes. I think especially, after being kind of cooped in quarantine for so long, I'm out here on the deck, and it's very therapeutic for me. And, I don't have to mask up. I don't have to put on gloves. I just sit out here and enjoy. So I've really enjoyed that kind of reconnection with just being outdoors. That sounds so trite, I guess, probably in terms of not being a big deal, but that's
a great choice for sure. I think I've been loving that too. Getting outside, it really is like a recharge or refresh.
Exactly.
Connecting in with nature, and I think connecting with the beauty of God's creation.
Yeah, and in the byproduct, one other final thing, just as a byproduct of all of this being cooked, is I'm really growing in my affections and appreciation for relationships. My family and whatnot, and really not taking things for granted as I had in the past. Taking for granted just being able to touch someone, or things that we just took for granted, or being able to sit in a movie theater with other people. Just those. I look at like things on television, and you can tell all of them were filmed before the pandemic began, because all of these people are close together. They're sitting in audiences and laughing and whatnot, and I just think, oh my gosh, we took that for granted. Just being able to sit and laugh in an audience together with someone next to somebody you don't know, and now there's this whole other dynamic. So just appreciating that, or knowing how much I'm going to appreciate that once we get to say, oh my gosh, we get to sit together and yell without a mask on. So,
Love that so much. Yeah, I think it's a good reminder. And sometimes it is that, taking it away and not having that, it really brings to light the beauty and the value in it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, speaking of, I really appreciate getting to sit down with you and take some time to chat, even over Zoom. So thank you for spending this hour with me.
Rachel, it was a pleasure. Listen, God bless you big time. And, again, it was an honor. We'll see all the things that'll happen as we come out of this too.
For sure. So, Steve, is there anywhere that people can find you or get connected with you?
Oh, sure. Anyone who wants to shoot me a message on Facebook, I'm at Steve Rooks on Facebook. And then Instagram, I'm Markell, MARKELL .Rooks, on Instagram. And, give me a message, keep me posted on things. I'd love to keep in contact.
Awesome. Thank you. Love Steve's story. I'm so grateful he took the time to join me for that conversation, and I hope it encourages you today. You can find links from the show in the full show notes on our website, creativeimpactpodcast.com. Are you enjoying the podcast? Do you want to partner with us to help it grow? You can become a monthly supporter by joining our Patreon community. As a supporter of the podcast, you get access to extra content that is only available for patrons. You can learn more at creativeimpactpodcast.com/PATREON. Another simple way to support the show is to leave a rating or review on iTunes. Next week, my guest for the podcast is Caitlin Harbaugh. Caitlin is a stay-at-home mom to Sadie, Ava, and Thomas, a wife to David, and a visual artist. I loved getting to chat with Caitlin about her current artistic projects and finding the spaces to create in the middle of her season as a mom to 3 little ones. Thank you for listening to the Creative Impact Podcast. Connecting with you is one of my favorite things. Don't forget to subscribe and connect with us on Facebook and Instagram. The music for the show was produced by Michael Cash. I'll see you next week for my conversation with Caitlin Harbaugh.